Good afternoon from the Philippines. A great question came up this morning that I thought I would address and see if anybody else is interested. That is it safe to bring your guitar from your home country, wherever that is, to the Philippines? So this isn't pertinent to a Philippines resident, but someone moving to the Philippines from the United States or Europe or wherever. And when I say safe, I'm not talking about the airlines. That's a completely different issue. And when I brought this guitar, I panicked about that, but it survived. Nor am I talking about safety here living in the Philippines. I am talking about the change in environment and the change in humidity that your guitar will go through moving. But that isn't unique to the Philippines. That is true of moving anywhere. Let's think about it. The guitar is a musical instrument predominantly made of wood, and that's true whether it's an acoustic guitar or an electric guitar. Wood expands and contracts based on humidity. That means in a relatively humid environment, the wood will take on some of that water. In a dry environment, the wood will shed off the water. That means if you move from New York City, fairly humid environment, sometimes at least, to Arizona, let's say, a much drier environment, the guitar will dry and potentially shrink. Conversely, you move from Arizona now to Florida, a very humid environment, the guitar will take on more water and expand. This is true of all wood, certainly of all real wood. And it's true not only of an acoustic guitar, it's also true to perhaps a lesser degree, but still of an electric guitar. So what's the answer to this? When you go from a wet environment to a dry environment, the solution is normally a humidifier. So an acoustic guitarist who knows his instrument will put a humidifier in the sound hole of the acoustic guitar to give it some extra moisture to compensate for the dryness of the environment. Let's say, again, in Arizona, or maybe in Boston in the winter when you turn on your heat. Very cold, you turn on the heat, the relative humidity goes down in your environment. What happens when the guitar shrinks potentially? And I've seen it. The top shrinks and the binding possibly can give way. The top shrinks and it can even crack. The neck can even shrink, and you'll find that the frets suddenly are poking out from the fingerboard because the fingerboard is shrunk slightly and the frets, being metal, have not. The converse is true. The guitar expands. It's actually not as bad as contracting. The wood can take on a fair amount of moisture. So the guitar adding moisture maybe isn't as detrimental as subtracting moisture. So in other words, when you move to the Philippines, your guitar will quickly be struck by added moisture, added wetness in the air, in the environment, and it will expand depending on where you moved from. When I moved with this guitar, the first month or two, the guitar went crazy. I tweaked the truss rod because the neck had clearly moved. Then a day or two later, I'd have to tweak it again. Sometimes I'd have to tweak it the opposite way because it had moved in the opposite direction. The poor thing really did struggle. But after a month or two, it stabilized. It stabilized to the environment that I now lived in. And from then on, I was fine. So I would say that that is in the long run safe to bring your guitar to the Philippines. In all likelihood, once the guitar has settled into the state that it'll be in, you may need to set it up again because there will be more moisture content overall in the instrument, and that may tweak your setup. So come to us for a setup at that point. But it is relatively safe, and the proof of that is many of the major manufacturers ship their guitars all over the world and sell them all over the world. You can buy a Martin here in the Philippines, you can buy a Taylor, you certainly can buy Fender electric guitars, all of which are manufactured in the United States. So be cautious. Don't expect that your guitar will not have an impact, at least temporarily, but it will after a while settle down and acclimate itself to its new environment, just as you're acclimating yourself to your new environment, and it will become playable again, probably with a little tweaking of your setup and your action. So that's my 2 cents about bringing a guitar to a different environment. And if you have a nice guitar that you are considering moving to the Philippines, certainly you probably are going to have more worries about the airlines than about the environment here. But once you get it here, it will ultimately settle down to the higher humidity. Now, what do you do once you are here? If you have air conditioning in your home or your house or your apartment, then you actually have pretty good control, because you can lessen the humidity in your environment and keep the guitar at, a 40 to 50% relative humidity, which most instruments like. On the other hand, if you don't have aircon, you'll have to deal with the fact that you'll be living in an environment that may be 60, 70, 80% relative humidity, and your guitar will probably take a little bit longer to adjust to that. Baby it for the first month or two. Keep it safe. Keep it in its case. A good case can certainly modify slightly some of the effects of humidity. There are also desiccant packs for guitars that absorb humidity that you put in the case. I have a few. It's questionable how much humidity they really absorb, but they help a little bit. But I think the bottom line is your guitar, in fact, will survive your move, just as you'll survive your move, but it may take a month or two for it to acclimate to the new environment. And you may want to, bring it to me, and we can tweak the setup. So that's the bottom line as far as will your guitar survive the move to the Philippines.